Mr. President, on Good Friday, another Capitol Police officer lost his life defending this building and all those in it. Officer Billy Evans was killed when an individual rammed Officer Evans with his car at the barricade Officer Evans was manning. Another Capitol Police officer, Officer Ken Shaver, was injured in the attack. Mr. President, we talk about how police officers leave their homes each day not knowing what they will face. Good Friday's attack was a reminder of how true that is. We can only be thankful that despite the ever-present risk that they will not make it back to their homes, men and women like Officer Evans and Officer Shaver still choose to serve, to put themselves on the front lines facing evil and danger so that the rest of us don't have to. I know the officers of the Capitol Police have had an unthinkably difficult few months. I hope they know how grateful we are for their service. Today, Officer Billy Evans lies in honor in the Rotunda, a fitting tribute to a man who lived and died to protect those who serve in this building. My thoughts and prayers are with Officer Evans' two children, Logan and Abigail, with his mother, Janice, and with all those who mourn this brave man. May his memory be eternal. Mr. President, on Friday, in what is fast becoming a theme of his presidency, President Biden caved to the demands of the far left and officially established his court-packing commission. Yes, court-packing. An idea that had been consigned to the ash heap of history almost a century ago has been given new life by the far left who, wait for it, are upset that a duly elected Republican president was able to get his justices confirmed to the Supreme Court. That's right, Mr. President. The terrible crisis we're facing is that a Republican president was able to fill 3 vacancies on the Supreme Court. I confess I had missed the part in the Constitution that said the Supreme Court is only legitimate if a majority of its members were nominated by a Democrat president, or at least reliably deliver liberals' preferred outcomes. But liberals didn't. And now they're eager to restore balance to the Supreme Court by expanding the number of Supreme Court justices and ensuring that a Democrat president fill the new spots. And President Biden, the same man who once called President Roosevelt's failed court-packing proposal a bonehead idea and a terrible, terrible mistake to make, is apparently falling in with the far left's demands. His commission, composed, I should say, largely of left-leaning scholars, Democrat operatives, and a few conservatives as bipartisan window dressing, will consider court packing and other structural reforms like term limits for Supreme Court justices. It's funny how Democrats weren't too concerned about term limits when revered liberal justices were serving for decades. But faced with the terrible prospect that a Justice Barrett or a Justice Gorsuch might have a similarly long career, the left is suddenly eager to limit Supreme Court terms. Mr. President, there are so many things wrong with the left's court-packing proposals that it's difficult to know where to begin. But let's start with the ludicrous idea that packing the court will somehow restore the court's legitimacy in the eyes of the public. Not that the court's legitimacy has been lost in the eyes of anyone but far-left liberals. In fact, the Supreme Court might be the federal institution that garners the greatest degree of respect from the public. The Supreme Court's approval rating routinely exceeds that of Congress, and usually by a substantial margin. But let's suppose for a second that liberals are correct and that the Supreme Court has lost its legitimacy in the eyes of the public. If that is the case, Mr. President, there is nothing Democrats could do that would be more guaranteed to further undermine public trust in the court than to pack the court. Nothing. The Democrats seriously think that they can enhance the credibility of the Supreme Court in the eyes of the American people by expanding it to add more Democrat justices. Do they think the 74 million people who voted for Republicans in the last election are going to see this as adding necessary balance to the court? If they do, they should think again. As Justice Stephen Breyer noted just last week, it is wrong to think of the court, and I quote, as another political institution. And it is doubly wrong to think of its members as junior league politicians. Structural alteration motivated by the perception of political influence can only feed that perception, further eroding that trust, end quote. That from Justice Stephen Breyer. Republicans, and I venture to say a lot of independent and Democrat voters as well, will see this for exactly what it is. And that's an attempt by Democrats to undermine an essential institution to ensure that Democrats get the Supreme Court rulings that they want. Democrats can dress up their openness to court-packing proposals in lofty language and full expressions of concern for the institution, but no one, Mr. President, is fooled. This is about power, pure and simple. Democrats want power. They want to be able to impose the policies they want when they want them. And they're afraid if the Supreme Court isn't packed full of Democrat nominees, the Supreme Court might rule against them. And so more and more Democrats are apparently perfectly willing to consider undermining, if not destroying, a fundamental part of our system of government to guarantee their political power. Mr. President, let's think about this in practical terms for a minute. Let's suppose that Democrats actually succeed in expanding the Supreme Court and adding more Democrat nominees. What do they think is going to happen next time there's a Republican president and a Republican Congress? Well, I can tell you. Republicans would make their own move to restore balance and add some more Republican Supreme Court nominees. And then I imagine when Democrats retook power, they'd do the same thing. In a decade or so, Mr. President, the Supreme Court could be expanded, I should say, to laughable proportions. Think about it. How many justices are we going to have? 15? 20? 30? There would be no end to this lunacy. Mr. President, in the words of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, only 2 years ago, and I quote, 9 seems to be a good number. It's been that way for a long time. I think it was a bad idea when President Franklin Roosevelt tried to pack the court, end quote. And that again, the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She said it was a bad idea, Mr. President. And fortunately for the country, when President Roosevelt proposed his court-packing plan, both Republicans and Democrats opposed it. Unfortunately, Democrats today seem to be more concerned with power than principle, or in some cases maybe lack the courage to stand up to the ferocity of the far left. In the past, President Biden has powerfully defended American institutions. But now he seems incapable of standing up to the far left. And so now we have an American president implicitly endorsing the idea of court packing by establishing a commission to study their proposal. Mr. President, Democrats like to talk about democracy and making sure that people have a voice. But it's becoming increasingly clear that they think their voices and the voices of liberal Americans are the only voices that should be heard. And if they can't win by convincing the public to elect strong Democrat majorities, they've made it increasingly clear that they're willing to undermine our institutions to ensure their grip on power. Don't like the makeup of the Supreme Court? Expand the court with new Democrat justices until you can be sure you get the results you want. Don't like Senate rules like the legislative filibuster that give the minority party a voice in legislation? Change the rules. Don't like your election prospects? Pass legislation like H.R. 1 or S1 designed to give your party a permanent advantage in electoral contests. Mr. President, I understand Democrats' passion for their political beliefs. I'm pretty passionate about advancing my political principles. But I believe we should be advancing our principles the democratic way by persuading people to vote for us, not by undermining our democratic institutions to give our party an advantage. I am deeply disappointed that President Biden found himself unable to stand up to pressure from the radical left. But I hope, Mr. President, I hope that at least some Democrats will find the courage to oppose these dangerous attempts to undermine our system of government. The Biden Court-Packing Commission is a solution in search of a problem and an attempt at a raw power grab by Democrats. It should quickly fade into the obscurity that it deserves. Mr. President, I yield the floor.